I think.
I want to see more of my really
Well, Cindy, I want to thank you for coming all the way up from the Buffalo to the North Woods of Minnesota. We're almost North Central. And we are streaming this live. So it'll be on our website for people to look at in the future. So Cindy Mueller is the Associate Conference Minister for Churches in Transition. Is that right?
Yeah, my official title is Minister for Congregations in Transition. And as I tell everyone, that means all of our churches.
Yeah, okay.
It's not just a certain kind of transition, because we're all experiencing a lot of transition.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
If we could begin with a moment of prayer. All right, let us be in prayer. Unfamiliar seas again. There's been a shift in the wind. We wrap ourselves in chaos and possibility and attend to this unexpected course. We prefer being experts in the skill that familiarity brings. It's something continually stirs and surprises us. We are always beginners. So let us go with curiosity and courage, with vision and vigor. Let us journey toward these opening doors, ready to learn and learn again, ready to embark and embark again, ready to trust and trust again in the one who has loved us in every beginning. Amen. Well, I appreciate being invited to be among you today. As I said, all of our churches are in transition in some sort. And at the last annual meeting, I had announced in a time when I was on stage that I'd been to about 50% of the churches, and I hope to get to the other 50%. And so I'm glad to be here with you. So you've increased my percentages. But this is a very chaotic, confusing time for the church. And it's not just the United Church of Christ. It's just the church in general in this country. And what we're really having to kind of try to grasp, because it's hard to grasp, is how to reimagine what it means to be church. And it's going to look different everywhere, in different settings, different communities. But no matter where we find ourselves, we are being called upon to trust God, to trust one another. And it requires a lot of courage to be in the church today. It also requires some curiosity. So it can be a time that's both disorienting and it can be a time that's energizing. You all were asked to take an assessment, participate in an assessment. There were 15 statements about vitality and a couple statements about sustainability. And I'm going to present your results, but first I want to give you a little background, kind of looking at a bigger picture for you and how you find yourself. But I thank you that you are willing to not be a church that waits till the last minute and says, oh my God, what are we going to do? That's not helpful for any of our churches. Some of them have done that. And it's presented quite a challenge for them. But as we all encounter decreasing numbers, aging in our congregations, I think we even owe it to ourselves even more to have the courage to really step back, take a look, and pray that God grants us the discernment about how to most faithfully move forward. So I'm glad that you are a people who are daring to believe, daring to hope. I really believe that God is kind of on the cusp of reimagining church across the board. It seems that COVID it kind of slapped a lot of our churches, and they realized, oh my gosh, we can't keep going the way we were. We can't make the same assumptions we used to make. But it takes courage to face that. It takes courage to face the reality that we find ourselves in. And I really do believe that God wants your congregation to be part of this wild and joyful, hopeful future that God has envisioned. We don't see it very clearly. Everybody wants to know, so what do I have to do? How do we fix this? Nobody has the answer to that, unfortunately. But together, we're starting to learn things that are working, things that are helpful, things that allow for God to envision all that God plans for each of us as the beloved people of God and in God's creation. So I would be remiss if I didn't bring greetings from the Minnesota Conference of the United Church of Christ. We are very grateful to have you as one of our lights in northern Minnesota, and thankful for the ministry that you do here. Thankful how you support our church's wider mission, which allows me to be here and to be working with your congregation, along with the many other things that the conference provides our churches. I have, this is a resource that actually comes to us from the Southern New England Conference. It's called Congregational Markers. And I don't know if I have enough, so you might have to share. So here's a couple of them. If you have a pen or a pencil, that will be helpful. Hand out more. If I end up with more, there you go. I do have more. So. I still have two. So who does not have one? I can take it. Okay. All right. So what I want you to do with this, I want you to look at the entire thing, both columns. And I want you to put a check mark by anything in either column that you think describes your church today.
That you think our church is like. I mean, how is our church like this? We have a lot of pencils. If anybody needs pencils or pen.
Yep, we'll need more.
Just put a check mark next to anything you think describes your church currently.
Like this.
I'm asking people to put a check mark by anything on either column that they think describes the church today.
Our church or all church?
This church today.
Pastor, do you have any immediate plans to leave? I want to check that one, but I need to.
Well, not on the horizon.
Okay.
Thank you, Lord.
Yeah, because then I'd be back feeling as search and call person on staff.
Yeah.
That's better. Thank you.
All right, and what I'm gonna have you do is put that aside for now, but I'll refer to it later. So, Michael called me, and asked if I would come to, begin a conversation about your congregation's future. And the assessment was a piece of it. It is sort of like a first step of things that churches are needing to do, so that we could really look at what's the true reality for your particular church at this time. I've been in ministry for about 37 years. I spent most of it as an intentional interim, and most of my churches were in small towns. And that experience taught me a great deal, especially because I served 16 different churches, and learning what churches are doing, what's working, what's not working, taking ideas from one and sharing them with others. And I'm currently on staff. I've been in my position for the Minnesota Conference for about 3.5 years. And as I mentioned, my portfolio is search and call. So when a church finds out their minister's leaving, I'm the one they call, and I work with them through that process. But I'm also, as part of my portfolio, is really working with any churches that are in transition. And what I mean by that is a church that finds that it needs to discern. It needs to take the time to reflect and discern together where it is God is calling them in the future. Which is where my portfolio comes together, because a church profile that you have to complete whenever you're searching for a new pastor, one of the 3 questions in it is, who is God calling you to be? Not now, in the future. So there's visioning work. And that's what's needed right now, in most of our churches. Because I'm gonna share what you all said, in your assessments, I just wanna make sure that we have some ground rules, in the sense that there's no right or wrong answers here today. No one should feel like they have to agree with everything being said today. It's a time for us to hear from one another. Each person responded to the assessment to the best of their ability, their perceptions. And we want to make sure to honor each and every one of those perceptions. I asked Michael if he had completed the assessment, and he hadn't and then he filled it out, but his are not included in the results. So I just want you to know, this is what you're saying. This is not what your pastor has said. And what I want to take a few moments, because I don't think we do this enough in our churches, I want us to identify those things that you really love about your church. What aspects of your church, what things about your church do you truly love? Again, no right or wrong answers.
The music with each other.
Music.
We're inclusive.
And what do you mean when you say inclusive?
I mean that, well, what I really mean is we have a son that's gay, and he would be welcome here.
Okay.
Because if we didn't have to vote on whether we accept them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's honest answer.
Mm-hmm. Good.
gone with us. I love that Esther and I were married in this church. And we're part of this church family. After not feeling welcome in other churches that we went to.
Great, great.
Well, then Michael starts every sermon by saying, everyone is welcome.
And you mean it,
Right.
you know, everybody.
I've
means
heard
it.
that in a lot of churches, but sometimes I don't see evidence of it.
Oh, and that's what we have, evidence, every Sunday.
What are other things you love about this?
That we support each other. Go ahead, Kay, what did you, sorry, that we support each other.
Yes.
Love the music, being inclusive, that you support each other.
That we have missions and that we do huge things and it all goes to the community for the better of the community. Which all, you know, we're always giving. And
Okay.
this congregation is very generous in that way.
I think last year we collected and passed on almost $20,000 in donations, not for the church, but for nonprofits.
Right, that's what I think, we practice what we preach. And I'm just not connected to this at all, I do have a pot of decaf and a pot of regular coffee.
Being all inclusive.
I should have sang that.
Not be able to have coffee.
Oh, I love that this church loves food. One of our members' grandsons was driving by with his family one day, and as he drove by the church, he goes, "That's the eating church." But it turned out, he only came here when we were having church suppers. Because they actually attended a different church, but he would come for our fish fry or pork cheek, whatever. So he associated us with
With the eating church.
I'll take it.
That's right.
That was our grandson too.
Like
That was my grand.
Yep.
nursery, you know, in the playroom and food.
Anything else?
I like just the overall messages and values, not just being inclusive, but also being loving, serving, justice issues. Things that I think help us strive to be better people.
Like it or not. I told that to pastor earlier this week. I said, sometimes I get these thoughts in my head and I'll come to church and be danged if he's not, that's the message he's talking about. It's like, I'm gonna see if Dan can read my mind too. He's preaching next week. If it's just Michael or if anybody.
We
thinks
have the
that.
Holy Spirit. Never underestimate.
I know, that's what I think too. It's like, well, I guess I'm gonna stay.
All right, I'm going to post this over here. If it'll stay, we'll see. There you go.
This reminds me of my job that I'm retired from.
Makes big things.
So looking back at what I handed, the handout and the 2 columns of items,
Oh, listen.
I'm curious of what people checked. I don't have one in front of me, so I'm gonna abbreviate things.
Here, you want, mine's checked.
No,
You can read it.
oh, well, yeah, but you,
Oh, we
I
can share with other people.
I just want to be able to get a sense of similar is there a similar sense amongst you? Is it very varied? Is it very varied? Is it varied or is it similar? Is it grouped in certain areas? You know, that kind of thing. So what did you check that you felt describes your currently describes your church?
It's interesting, we checked everything on the right, nothing on the left.
Okay.
Ditto.
There's the
As
same for
say,
me.
the majority, me. I did majority on the right and
Yeah.
nothing on the left. There was a couple I didn't do.
Yeah, you too.
So who only checked things on the right?
Well, I did check some on the left.
Yeah. You don't have to have all,
Okay.
have every single thing.
So a lot on the right.
A lot, the majority of your things. that doesn't surprise me, as I know your assessment results. So again, I mean, this is developed by the Southern New England Conference of the United Church of Christ. And they just felt it was helpful to be able to give people some things that describe when you're facing threshold moments, and if in fact you're leaning toward a very significant threshold moment that's called legacy congregation. Those are the congregations that are beginning to discern that their ministry is coming to a completion, and they will eventually close. And yet, there's other things going on as well. And it's not to say that a church that ends up closing doesn't have some of these over here, because they can. So, who did not check everything on the right?
Everything? I do.
Okay,
Didn't check everything.
all right. That did, so there's about 4 of you, or 5 of you, 6 of you, okay. And did anybody check any on the left?
I did.
What did you check?
The first one that and the most significant one was no new leaders emerging, leaders are tired. I put the emphasis more on leaders are tired because
Yeah.
people are getting worn out with all
Well, I
this.
didn't consider me a leader.
Huh?
I didn't consider me a leader. I was a worker bee.
You're one of the reasons I didn't check that. Because you are a new leader.
I did notice that with some of the people, when I looked at your nominating slate on your
Yeah.
annual report, it's like,
Yes.
there's a name again. There's a name again.
Yeah.
There's a name again.
Yeah.
That's why on that issue right there that Debbie just mentioned, I didn't check it, but I changed it a little bit.
Okay, and what'd you change it to?
Not new, no new leaders, emerging leaders are tired. And I changed it to not many new leaders are emerging, leaders are getting tired.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Adapted it a little bit.
That one goes right down the middle there. Oops.
I thought, why do we need a new leader? Michael told us he's not letting us. That's why I didn't check it.
Because in the church, we're all leaders.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I
Especially in the
find
United
out.
Church of Christ.
Yeah.
To add to that board, our good sense of humor.
Yeah, that's right. We do have a good sense
That
of
is
humor.
extremely
We
helpful.
do
isn't it?
have a good sense of humor.
If there's a group sitting around a table, even if it's a meeting of a board, they're laughing as they're meeting. I do that. The nominating committee laughs as they're sitting there trying to. Trying to find leaders.
Yeah, there's a lot of peer pressure. That could go on the negative side. They just look at you. No,
So-
no, no.
So what would you lift up as, if you look at the ones you checked, really rise to the top, like this has nailed us. This is definitely us.
Community,
Community?
yeah, reaching out. We're very active in the community, I believe.
Serving others.
That's
Serving others, yeah. Serving others in community groups. I feel that.
I will say I am not a great speller, so.
Oh,
if I spell
don't worry
something
about it.
wrong, Please be generous with me.
I really think we need to mention the adoption of new technology, because I think it's
Oh,
why
yeah.
we survived as well as we did.
Yeah, I agree. When I saw that, I was like, oh, yeah, that's new technology. So we're trying to figure out how to use it, but we got it.
Got it.
Pastor put up a mesh system, so now we can get Wi-Fi all over the church.
Yeah, that's nice. I
It used to be behind
appreciate
a
that.
stone wall.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, and so you had to kind of like stand by the window.
Yeah.
But now,
Remember the early days, we're all like this?
Yeah.
I had a signal. And I realized on my way here,
Yeah.
I lost my signal many times.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was just listening to
Northland.
music off my phone,
Oh,
because I knew I was gonna try and bother to find radio stations. And I'm like, Why isn't it working? Oh,
SOS.
oh, yes, exactly. It says SOS. I've never seen that before. I've just seen no bars. Yeah, technology
means you get
is a
additional
huge
costs.
thing. If our churches haven't done that, it's a pretty telling sign. Or those that did and achieved being able to have worship online somehow, some way, whether it was Facebook or YouTube or whatever, some of them stopped doing it,
Yeah.
which is incredibly sad because it reached people it never would have reached
Yeah.
otherwise. And especially those are members, well, you, I'm sure, have people who live somewhere else part of the year. And some of those people who relocate to be with family, but yet they still want to be in worship with you.
We have a very adult person who grew up in this church, who listens to our services from his home in the cities.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's just the coolest.
Yeah.
So anything else in particular that you thought really captivates?
Can I open my big mouth again? Less conflict, conflicts resolved effectively. I've been around here long enough to remember some of the difficult conflicts of the past. And I really think there's less and that people work at resolution better than in the past.
I agree with that. And I've only been around for a short time. You know, I've only been here a few years, but the first couple of years I was like, holy cow. What the heck are they fighting for? The same.
But we would hope that
It's way better.
people care enough that they would seek to work things out. Doesn't mean you're all gonna agree. Right, no, we're in the church. We all don't agree, especially in the United Church of Christ. But that is a strong, very helpful tool for a church. Anything else?
I put that facilities are in good condition, generally.
I would agree with that.
What'd you say, Dan?
Facilities are in general good condition.
Yeah, yesterday we put on there was a funeral here, service. And people, I heard several comment about how wonderful this church was.
Yeah.
And they just,
Love that
yeah,
sanctuary. It's
yeah, they just said,
nice
oh,
feel to
this
it.
is so nice. It's
Well, and the fact that what often happens for churches, if they're struggling, with having funds that meet their needs, sometimes they'll cut the budget to deal with the
To maintain.
maintenance of a building, and then one thing topple another, and you have a disastrous situation.
Well, we've been blessed with some very generous estate
Right.
Gifts.
gifts, thank you.
Mhm.
And we have done a lot of big ticket items for the church over the last 5 years, but we've been able to draw from those funds. For example, we got to switch over to gas from fuel oil. That turned out to be about a $20,000
Yeah.
investment that we are now reaping about $3,000 to $4,000 a year in savings on.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's
But
looking
we had the
forward.
money for that investment because of these donations.
Mhm. Looking forward and planning for the future.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think a part of the point that I want to make with this is that dealing with any kind of significant threshold moment in the life of the church, because we all have experienced them over the years, the sooner we address it, as it arises, instead of putting it off or pushing, kicking the can down the road, whatever the phrase might be, or just, really hoping that something will come along and fix our problems. That's never a healthy way to look at the future. Because I'd suggest that as people of faith, that we're called to plan. God doesn't want us to just sit back, whereas some people might actually say that we'll pray about it. Yes, we should be praying about it, but that doesn't mean God lets us off the hook. I mean, God wants us to be looking forward, planning for, making decisions now, instead of letting things passively evolve. let's see. I really think that being a part of the church today, I mean, I didn't grow up in the United Church of Christ, but I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church. But the church of our younger years is a very different church than it is today. And that's, again, across the board. It's not just United Church of Christ by any means. And it takes a deep faith in God to believe that there's a future for the church, because so many things are happening around us. I already mentioned once this morning was, you know, even in our conference, we've had 9 churches close, you know, which is, they're horrible days. They're absolutely horrible days. And yet, for those churches that really worked on that, it was really a celebration, because they left a legacy in their communities, a legacy that would not be able to continue had they not had the ministry they had at one point. But, you know, there's less and less interest in people wanting to be members of churches, much less any other kind of institution. There are, young people aren't interested in attending worship. I mean, my husband and I are both clergy. We have served churches together and separate. Our kids were raised in the church, and they don't go to church. And it's not that they have anything against the church, because they're telling me all the time that they're constantly fighting the battle with their friends or acquaintances or coworkers, saying horrible things about the church. And what they're doing is they're talking about a very different brand of church than the United Church of Christ. And so I take great pride that my son in particular, who's an attorney, will step forward and say, you know, not all churches are like that. You know, and he'll point out if there's one in the community, you know, to say, and that church, that's one of our churches, and they're not like that. You would be welcome there no matter who you were, no matter what path you walk, no matter if you really have never been in church, never even thought about being in church. There's, you know, parents, there's no more the option that one works and one stays at home. It's become too expensive.
Right.
That now we don't have people staying at home raising children only versus having full-time jobs or at least part-time jobs to make ends meet. And there's so many different kinds of activities for kids nowadays. It absolutely amazes me. Every time I drive past the hockey rink in my town, the parking lot's jam-packed. I'm on my way to church. Sunday morning. And at other times of the year, the soccer fields that are right next to it, there's like 6 soccer fields, jam-packed with little kids, all ages, parents. And it's somehow like that thought as I listen to my children raising their children, they sort of think that if we don't get our kids involved in all this stuff, we're not being a good parent. And yet, maybe not getting them involved in church. You know, our Sunday schools have disappeared in a lot of our churches because we don't have children or youth in our churches. And then on the rare occasion, my son and his family and his toddler came to church with me once in the last couple months. And they looked around. I mean, they saw a couple people, and I'm a member of a big church. They saw a couple people that were their age. They saw a number of children. Their son, like I said, he's a toddler. And so it's not like, I mean, I remember growing up, it felt like everybody's family was at church, you know? So that when a younger person comes to church, they don't necessarily see a lot of people who look like them,
Right.
who have kids their age, or have programming what they were hoping, possibly, that would be offered for their children. So it's that catch-22. All this stuff is happening. And every church is experiencing this. It just looks and feels a little different in different churches. So I want to take some time and talk about the various internal things that are currently impacting your church and its future. And I want you to stop me if you think what I'm saying is inaccurate, because this is just after reading resources that, I always give a list of things that I want when I come to a church. And so I'm gleaning from that information as well as your assessments, all tallied up together and individually. So if I'm wrong, challenge me, because it very likely could be that I interpreted something wrong. So, let's see. So, I have of the information that I've been given, it appears that you have 83 members. So, and of those that are active would be more like 25. And you've got as far as attendance and worship, you've got the difference between summer and winter, which is much more pervasive up here. And so in the summer, I'm told you have 25 to 30 people in attendance. And in the winter, you have 20 to 35.
No.
That's a little
This is
high.
the other way around.
It would be the other way.
Maybe 20 to 30 at most, but.
Except Christmas Eve, except Christmas
Well,
Eve.
Christmas Eve will throw off everything.
Yeah, right. Christmas Eve is good, but
Yeah, if you take that out of the mix. So.
I would say,
Winter seems high.
I'd say between
35 is
18
high for winter.
18 and 25.
18, yeah.
18 to 25 in the
For
winter.
average, probably.
I thought 15.
I think the average in the summer is more
Well,
like
sometimes.
30 to 32
We
than
can run-
25.
What's
Okay,
the
so 30
definition of
is-
an active?
Okay,
Yeah, that's right.
okay.
What's an active membership?
Well, the membership number that I was given was 83.
Yeah, but what is
The
active?
active.
Act-
Oh,
That show
The
up.
people who show up, the people who participate, the people that you see,
On a regular basis.
the people who contribute, these are people who have a vested interest in the life of the church.
I actually think that's maybe a little more.
And then maybe a little more.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I set up 40 cups for communion.
I know, but if you look at all the people who are involved at some point, like Ken.
One thing I did, and I asked Michael about this, is we have what's called an 11-year report. Every January, all of our churches get a yearbook report, meaning they need to give certain information about the church. That information comes to the conference office. The conference office, all we do is double check the OCWM giving, the per capita giving, other, like your special offering today, other kinds of giving to the UCC. Anything that's come through the conference office for those kind of things. That's the only thing we check to verify that those are the correct numbers. And I had guessed that it's probably been 11 years at minimum that information's been filled out by this church for whatever reason. And so you have the same number every year of the number of members, the number of active, the same budget, which we know that there's no way a church's budget stays the same 11 years down the road. So I bring this up because obviously that's not the greatest information for your church. I would, however, strongly encourage to make sure that that does get completed in January and gets sent in before the deadline, because it's all electronic now. Because now the national setting of the church has told us if a church for 5 years in a row doesn't complete this yearbook report, that they're no longer considered a UCC church. We don't really know what that means, but so many of our churches have stopped filling that out. We really it really harms us as a denomination because we don't know where we're at. We don't know, because a part of it is like, how many members have joined, how many members have died, how many members have left, you know, how many children are involved in faith formation, how many youth, how many adults. All those questions get asked, but the only people who can answer them are the leaders of the churches.
Who does that get sent to?
It gets sent to the church. My administrative assistant sends it out, C. Chang. And my understanding is it goes to a church email and it goes to the pastor's email. So in January, if you don't get, which I should just double check to make sure that the church's email is the correct one that we have, because I have found that's not the case, because it's been 11 years or more that we haven't gotten information from them. So,
I don't remember seeing it,
well,
and I've been the moderator for several of the past
And it
several
may
years.
simply have not been passed on. I mean, I think that we probably received it, and probably I've dropped the ball on that, so it's,
Well, if it went to the church.
Sometimes it's just
I
like a
remember-
CC.
I remember filling it out, and mine, the last year I was here was 13, so it'd be 11 years ago.
And you filled out
I
yourself?
think I filled it out.
okay.
You know,
We need to try to,
We'll make
of
sure,
course, it's hard, I'm often gone most of January, so it's hard
we'll
to,
make sure it's done.
well, yeah, you get January and February total, if not all of March too, to fill it out. I mean, it's not a deadline until, I believe, the end of March, could be
Yeah,
at the beginning.
so we will do that.
maybe when you get it,
I'll pass it
there
on.
might be a few people you should forward it to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because usually it takes a few different people to be able to come
What I
up
will
with the
do when it comes in, I'll pass it on to the council, the general council.
And we'll have to
So,
get it on
Um,
the agenda.
some of the other information that I gleaned from, the information shared with me had to do with your income, your expenses, and then I have another that's, other assets. What I do is I figure out what percentage of your budget is spent in these different areas. What you called pledged and regular contributions, that represents 88%. Which is a really nice, healthy percentage.
Oh.
It's not always like that. There's usually a lot more, larger percentage coming out of some of these other assets that churches might have. Or there's a ton of fundraising in order to pay the bills. Okay? There was something called plate contributions, that's only 3%. Rental and fundraising was 1%. Benevolence, special offerings, and mission offering is 4%. There's a fifth Sunday offering, what is that?
Months where there is a fifth Sunday, we've taken to a designating where that, what charity?
Oh, so
That's
might
gonna
go to
go
the food
to?
shelf or might go, okay.
Right.
All right, so that could have been lumped in with here, so that would make it, 5% for mission.
That fifth Sunday used to be for the church, because most people divided their,
Giving.
their pledges into 4 units per month. So the fifth Sunday, we generally had very low. So we used to encourage people to actually increase their pledge every fifth Sunday.
Divided by
One.
52 instead of, yeah.
But then we decided people weren't motivated by that, but they got really motivated by giving to charities.
Good.
So now we have 4 Sundays a month with designated charities.
4 Sundays a year.
Year, yeah.
4
So
Sundays a
then
year.
you're giving away 5%
Yeah.
of what you bring in. And I've seen anything from less than 1% up to 10 in this.
And so if you're just looking at our budget, a whole lot of our giving doesn't come through our budget. We collect money at this venue that goes directly to the charity without coming through our
Oh, okay.
budget.
Okay, so this would be much higher than 5%.
Right.
Okay? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people go through it.
The whole rummage sale pretty much went
What?
back out.
A rummage sale went all out.
And that doesn't come through the budget.
Right. Right.
in and out through Women's Fellowship.
Okay, all right. And miscellaneous, which includes dividends, interest, memorials, and, is 3%. There's always gotta be a miscellaneous line. So, in the fiscal year you just finished, not just finished.
Yeah, it was the end
Well,
of June.
June 30th.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Was $91,555 that you took in. Again, not counting all of those things that never go through the budget. All right. Then we have, and I just want to point out that other assets that you have, I should change. You listed that you have cash in the bank of just over $37,000. UCC investment is just over $1,900.
19,000.
19,000, sorry. And stock investment, $6,265. So that's a total of $62,446.
And that's about with regard to the memorial fund, which is completely separate from that.
We have a memorial fund account that, what's it have?
It's over 80.
Over 80,000 in it.
Over 80? Okay.
That's in a memorial fund.
That's not the, what's the UCC investment?
No.
No. And wishing us-
Those are the gifts, right?
Savings account.
Those are gifts that,
No, that's,
left.
it's completely, it's in addition to. what
Okay,
she's got.
and how much did you say was approximately in that?
She's got that in.
Around 80,000.
Okay. All right. Yes, that's a different, definitely presents a different picture.
I want to mention one other thing about our income that is significant for our future. Of our pledged income, about 35 to 40% is from one individual
Oh,
who is a benefactor. He's not a member of the church. A few people in the church know who he is, most do not. But
Did he grow up in this church, or at least his parents were real active?
I think so. But I think he's also an older person. How old is he?
He's in his
85?
80s.
that's young.
That's young.
that's very significant information. That's a huge percentage.
It's kind of like where there's a way in which it seems like to me we're in good shape right now and probably for several years, but 10 years from now, things could be
Completely different.
dramatically different.
All right, then I wanted to look at your expenses and to see how those are distributed. So, having, a half-time pastor represents 45% of your budget. It's very normal for it to be around 50%.
Right.
Okay.
The building and property represents 29% of your budget.
3%.
What I call administration, is 13%. And worship, which includes your, all music involved, is 11%. But it doesn't include your minister
Right.
portion of that, obviously. And then mission and benevolence here, again, because I only
didn't
have,
know about.
right, the only thing that went through the budget that I could see was 2%. So we know that that's much higher. What I call programming, Christian ed, I know that you have a subscription to Upper Room. It ended up being all those things you put together less than 1%.
Okay.
So your total budget expenses was $114,476, leaving you with a deficit of $22,921. So keeping in mind about your mission giving, does this feel correct to you?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Then. Let's see.
I'm surprised worship's only 12 or 11.
Really? Now remember, it doesn't include Michael at all.
I know, but music budget alone is 12,000.
Yeah,
Which is 10%.
well, and what I had, the figure that I actually had, it was $12,374.
There you go.
So it's just a little bit that's not
No,
music.
spiritual life would be in that. Let's see. Well, I'm surprised it was only 11.
So, I'll get to the right place here.
Administration.
So,
Mhm.
because I don't like to assume, if you had a almost $23,000 deficit, where did the money come from to pay that?
Was that last year or this year?
This was the
Ending in
year, the
June.
fiscal year you just ended.
Just ended. It came from from those funds in our
Other.
From the other assets.
memorial
And memorial.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So with that kind of information, I want to ask you some things about your building. I think I know the answer to this, just because I've been in your building and looked around outside. But are there right now issues that have not been addressed? That have not been maintained that you're anticipating in this upcoming year?
Would we include the roof in that?
Yeah. We've had some recent storm damage to the roof, and insurance companies are being weird about roofs right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not real sure where we stand on that.
Okay, so was a lot of damage done?
We could probably go up with a glue gun and fix most of it. I meant actually caulking gun.
Yeah.
But we did file a claim with the insurance, and we're still trying to sort out their answer.
Okay, all right. Is there anything else that you can think of that, whether it's budgeted or not? I'm looking right now for things that are not budgeted for.
You would know better than.
Dishwasher isn't working.
Anything else?
The dishwasher is
Only our
broken.
dishwasher
Well,
is,
and we don't know how significant it is. It might just be snaking out the drain, because this is just as of yesterday.
Ah, okay.
Oh,
I didn't know this could be a minor
What is that?
fix to it.
Did you bring up the dishwasher?
Yes,
We don't know if that's gonna be something minor or
Right.
not.
but Ryan mentioned the brick at the front of the building
Did
that's.
you have some stonework in
You're
it?
talking about the sandstone?
Yeah.
Crumble?
I'm starting to think of.
And then there's the $28,000 assessment.
Oh, right.
yeah, that's
Yes.
really significant, even though it's over 5 years, correct?
More.
What's that?
It's more than 5 years.
Special
It's 10
assessments
years.
on the
Oh, it's
street.
over 10, okay.
Oh,
It's
oh,
3,000
taxes.
a year,
Oh, yeah, for the
at a
road.
relatively low interest rate of 3%.
Right,
Our investments are pulling in more than that, so we're just gonna go, I mean,
so that, again, is gonna come out of this?
Yeah.
So it's not gonna be budgeted, it's just gonna
oh, we're not
assume,
trying to budget it, but we just got hit with it, so.
okay, all right, so,
And it hasn't been finalized yet, the actual amount, so
that's,
the city's working on it.
so you've heard about it? It
We,
hasn't-
we received a letter from the
You
city,
get the proposal?
Mhm.
and it's a proposal, yeah.
Heads up.
Okay,
The parking lot is not in particularly good condition.
Yeah. Especially this side.
Yeah,
That's
the
a bad.
parking lot might need some work.
mhm.
Eventually, this septic system will fail. They don't last forever, but it's such a small use that it limps along, but if it's overused, it will fail. And that could be as expensive as 50,000 in the future.
Don't you think they'll just make us hook up to the city?
No, it's not that easy.
Okay.
We have to go under the highway
Hmm.
to get to the.
They would have did it to begin with, but maybe. It
Buildings.
still would probably be that.
I mean, in your case, it consumed 29% of your budget. It's usually a very significant piece. So the ongoing care, just like our homes, you know, in order to maintain them, it's very costly. And our churches, I'm told, if I remember correctly, that this was built in 1960s, correct? And so there's some advantages to that because it's not as old. But also when churches aren't used as much as they used to be, sometimes that like with septic systems, that can be an issue of its own. But our churches were built in the day when we all had lots more members. And so it's fallen on the shoulders of fewer and fewer people to maintain costs that just continue to rise. So, what I thought, and not knowing about this, $80,000 in memorial funds, is looking at, and now, I mean, I knew about the assessment, I knew about the roof, and nobody can anticipate, you know, how many years something like the septic system going out, but at least you've upgraded your heating system, and you're not using oil anymore and that kind of thing. But if with that information and knowing this, that one person pays for 35-40% of your budget, we're looking at, for sure, 5 years that you could potentially run out of money if that person still stays alive for 5 more years. And so to look forward, you know, look ahead and plan for, like we all want to do with our lives, that this is a significant threshold for you that you're experiencing, and it needs to be anticipated and planned for. I was going to ask about the human capacity. That's really, when I talk about sustainability, people always think of money, you know, the money coming in. Very, very important piece and needed. But there's also the human capacity piece. And as our congregations age and shrink, it becomes harder and harder to be able to plan for the future. I noticed only one opening on your nominating slate, which I applaud you for. Though I did see some people can show up 2-3 times. And so that, you know, can present some added burden for a few leaders, as I heard a distinction between getting tired versus being tired. That's something to be aware of, because that will inform your future as well. You currently have a half-time pastor. And how many years have you been here?
5.
5, yeah.
I was gonna say. Okay. And when you said in 2019 is when it went to halftime, what was it before that?
No, it
No.
was went to halftime in 2013.
2000.
Oh,
Yeah,
13.
When I left, that was about one of the major
Right.
Time before that.
that I left, because it was.
Okay,
it was-
because you followed.
No,
No.
No,
There was interim in between.
there was
Three
Yeah.
in between.
3 ministers,
Okay, but Dan, were you full-time?
yes.
Okay, so Dan was your last full-time pastor, and then it went to halftime.
Yeah.
Okay, with the others. I always take this opportunity to educate our congregations that you have a halftime pastor that has a level of experience that is much higher than what you pay him. And it's the reason we have conference guidelines is for people to try to stay in a place that provides for a just wage and compensation. And so I just mentioned to you, because obviously it's your church's choice of what you believe you can afford, what you should be paying, but you do not follow conference guidelines. So you follow. No.
We're underpaying if you're
Yeah.
saying.
Right. When you look at his whole package, you are underpaying him. So, and total package includes all the benefits, you know. I mean, you're fortunate that he's on Medicare. That saved you a boatload. But it's always amazing to me when churches, when they go through searches I make them prove to me how much the whole package costs them. Cause they'll just check off, yeah, we follow conference guidelines. Like, nope. Not gonna validate your profile, your position can't be posted until you show me you know what that costs you. And it's gonna be a range, depending on the years of experience of the minister they end up calling. But they almost always underestimate how much it costs to live somewhere. And they always underestimate healthcare. I mean, we all have to pay horrendous healthcare costs. But when it comes to the minister, for some reason, that's not necessarily been my experience, that they think, oh, well, we'll just have a single pastor with no kids. Like, you want your search committee to have that restriction? I don't think so. So it's those guidelines are there to assist our congregations. I mean, in our polity, are they suggestions? Yes, they're strong suggestions, strong recommendations, but a church is the one that decides how it compensates its minister. I have a few questions for you. And you might want to refer to the markers, congregational markers. In answering this, may or may not help you, but how would you describe the overall sense of the church's future? Not just your sense, but how would you characterize the overall sense of the church's future? Is it hopeful? Is it in survival mode? Energized? Just maintaining? Maybe you have another word that you would use instead.
I would use worried.
Worried. Worried. Okay.
I see this building and it's as an asset to the church, where the church would want to sell it to reap profits from the money they would make from this church, because this is prime location. That they would eventually say, hey, you can't do it, but your church is gonna make money for the UCC.
Well, that would always be our decision though. It wouldn't be the UCC.
But I'm just saying, if it came to the point where, you know, everybody was, hey, the church is gonna see this as a big dollar sign for this church.
But the dollars wouldn't go to this church, I
It
understand.
would go to the UCC, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If you sell a building or property
Where does
to a
the money go?
nonprofit, it's all your money. You can maintain that money.
Oh.
The issue becomes if you sell it to somebody that's not a
Commercial,
nonprofit.
yeah.
Because then there's taxes and I don't understand how that works.
My feeling, and this is just my own, and I know you don't want my own,
I do.
but I don't know how to say it any different, and I don't wanna put words in somebody else's mouth, but look around. We're here, and we're slowly dying away, cause we don't have any youth, we don't have any younger people, we don't have children coming up. And it's the same, every organization I'm involved in has the same problem. We're aging out, and so we're slowly dying. We lost a boat full of active members in the last 3 years that were part of this church. It used to be bustling and the things we would do, and now we've cut all the things we do in half just for an event because we don't have the people or the bodies or the energy to sustain it and keep it going. And that's what I see. I don't know how we build up our membership. I go around and everybody talks about the same thing. How do we keep the member? How do we get members to come, and how do you do it?
And institutions are not of interest to people of other generations.
I know,
That's
so
not
I
what
don't-
they're looking
I
to
see
do.
us as a slowly dying. That's what I see. As we die off, I don't know whoever's gonna be left to hold the
So
reins. I
what
don't know what to
word
do.
would you put on that? I mean, it's not hopeful. It's not even maintaining.
It's kind of like we are living fully for the time we've got left.
Yeah, yeah, you know, yeah. Doing the very best, and we're trying. I mean, when we go out, and I can't even tell you how many times in a day, because I talk about the church all the time, and the church is us, you know, all of us that are here. It's not this building, and they'll say, well, what church do you go to? The community, you should come on down and join us. You'll love it there, because everybody's welcome, you know? And they go, oh, yeah. I mean, oh, several times a week. People ask me what church I go to, because I'm always referring to it, because it's a good place to be. But, and we do good things. I mean, I don't know if the guy ever came through with his money, but we have people from other religions in the community for the gazebo concerts. We're gonna make a donation because we don't want you to ever stop doing this, because every Sunday night, all summer long, our backyard is full of people that don't come to this church.
So what are other words
Good.
that you would use to
I don't know.
describe the overall sense of where the church?
Determined.
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 Well, but determined to live until we're
Concerned. Concerned.
attrition.
Okay, concerned.
Yeah, concerned.
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned.
Anything else?
Committed,
Committed, yeah, committed.
Committed?
Sometimes it's-
Joyfully so.
Yeah.
Joyfully what?
So, joyfully committed.
Committed, comma, joyfully so, period, exclamation.
So tell me about how your congregation handles change. How do you see when something happens that calls for changes to take place? How do you handle that?
Go to another funeral.
Well, that's a change.
Yeah.
Really?
I really think that we try to embrace it.
I think we celebrate it. Look right behind you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that stage has changed. We've had so much fun with it.
And so have people of the community.
Yes.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
You know, and even like the stage behind you, there are a lot of things where an individual will come up with an idea and invariably they get the support of the church. And, I don't see people saying, well, you know, I don't know, I don't think so. You know, it's like, wow, what a great idea, let's try it.
So
That's my-
you're open to experimenting.
Even though, you know, there's always some resistance to change, but I think we're actually seeking change. We're looking out for new opportunities, new
Yes.
things, you know, it's like,
That's true.
we want to find new ways to serve the community and make use of the resources that we have.
We do.
Yeah, we're open to change. For example, at our rummage sale this summer, we didn't put tablecloths on all the tables.
Well, that's
We
responsible.
just all the tables.
You don't put 3 tablecloths on anymore.
And then we sold the tables.
Yeah, we did. Because we're too old to carry them.
Those old heavy, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And if you have wheels on yours, I'm surprised.
If it was the right kind of entity, we gave them to them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Sure.
You're not wrong here.
Are you
Oh
a
my
congregation that tends to spend a lot of time looking to your past
No,
rather than to your future?
I don't think so.
That's not the sense I got either, but I gotta ask if I know. Sure.
Is that a bad
Sure
thing?
missed a lot of people to that extent.
I was gonna say, the only thing is,
It can hold back a congregation if they keep looking back to
What
what
we
we
used to
always
do.
used to say, we used to do this, or we've never done this before. Remember in the day when we had, you know, Sunday school rooms were filled and.
well, we do that once in a while and we dream about that, but it's not about, you know, commiserating so much as, and then there's lots of good stories and we spend time laughing and
Oh, yeah, I
reminiscing,
mean,
but
It's
not the begrudging so much.
right, it's, you're looking at a legacy, like something that has happened. But it
What
doesn't
amazes me-
necessarily entail what your future will look like. It does, but it's not like it has to be like that
Right.
in order to continue forward. Okay. All right. So tell me about what kind of what kind of events, kind of mission ministry activities does the church sponsor put on, that's not meant as a fundraiser for yourself?
Gazebo
That
concerts.
you're involved, that you all are involved in
Gazebo
participating,
concerts.
not
Yeah,
just,
That's the gazebo
putting money.
concerts.
you know, paying for something.
That's the gazebo concerts.
Okay.
And
This
they're
coffee house.
not for mission, I mean.
No, they're not. They're not. They're not for
the
anything.
Community, but we don't give them
But
money.
you know, in a way, we're supporting musicians in our community. I mean, I see that as being kind of important too.
Yeah, I mean, I do
No.
too, but I thought you meant.
Well, I thought she said something some event that we do, that we sponsor, but that we don't make any money off. It's not a fundraiser for us. It's not any benefit from us. And that's the gazebo concerts, because the only ones that benefit are the people that come and perform and the people that come and listen.
And then,
Right. Community, from the community.
Right, community, they
What
come
did-
and they listen.
More than once you've done a Christmas music.
Yeah.
Event
Oh, yeah, we've done that a few times.
where the community is invited.
Okay. Is there any other kind of mission kind of activities that
Do
you
a blood
sponsor?
drive once a year,
Pardon?
a blood drive.
A blood drive? Okay.
Every January.
And the coffee house is strictly for charities.
Okay, so the money that comes in for the coffee houses goes out.
Right. No, not to the musicians, just to the charity.
So does the musician volunteer or?
Yeah,
Cool.
We ask them to volunteer.
Yes, yes,
and they do,
And they
because
do.
they could say no.
Right.
And they
want
do.
to.
certainly.
We do a lot of food stuff, where we, like
Yeah.
today, everything that we raise today goes to a donation to someplace else. And, when we do, like, once a month or so, we have a, potluck. And the money raised there goes to a particular, or different, charity.
And we used to always do a March food shelf concert. We do. And then the money went to the food shelf and then, of course, March is where they double your.
We
Yeah.
don't probably use this
Give a lot of
stage.
support to the food shelf.
Yes.
We do.
Interspersed kind of, but there's just a lot of attention.
There's money and there's people power.
Well,
We go
that's-
volunteer for a couple months out of the year.
Primarily Joanne.
No. I can look around and you see lots of faces that are.
Yeah, yes, right, right.
So
People
we've
are
been-
able.
We've been talking about a lot of aspects of the life of your church. How would you articulate what you believe the purpose of your church is?
Keep me sane. It does. It does.
You know, there was a comment here on this list at the very bottom on the left side, said, resilience limited to staying open to bury people. Well, it's not limited to that, but there's a certain resilience, I think, among the congregation that so when we do a funeral, we don't make any money off of it. I know that some churches charge. We stopped charging. We decided that families need to be able to count on the church to help. So the Women's Fellowship no longer charges. We don't charge for building use or anything. They can pay for the people who are working upstairs, the soundboard, video, whatever. But my point is simply, that is a part of our identity, I think, at this point too, is that we feel a real commitment to being able to do that for families. But it's not anything that's money for the church, either the general budget or Women's Fellowship.
That's something I.
We will marry and bury anybody in the community. They don't have to be a member.
Right.
No,
Yes.
And that's really good, because there's a lot of places that won't. You gotta be a member, you gotta do this. It's like, well, people still want to have that Christian wedding.
And
What the
we
heck
don't
kind of Christians
advertise
are
it.
we?
But if a nonprofit came to us, and they do occasionally, and ask to use our building, we don't charge. We sometimes receive from them some kind of an honorarium or something, but we've let various groups in to use our building for specific purposes. And like I said, we don't advertise, because if it got to be too much, it would be too much pretty quick, but we consider this a a resource that can benefit more than just our congregation.
So I would venture to guess that one of your core values is, community.
It is.
Have we told you that we have a group meeting here every other Monday as a congregation? This is a rather interesting story. It's in Wisconsin Synod group. And none of the other Lutheran churches would let them in.
Interesting.
See,
So they meet every other Monday night.
second.
They meet here
Monday.
two Mondays a week. We do
A
charge
month,
them.
a month.
Okay, a month. What is with this? Like I said, don't listen to what I say. Listen to what I say.
Know what I mean, not what I say.
2 Mondays a week. Yeah, already.
They pay rent.
I think we charge
Yes.
$60, and that's really just to turn the lights on. Turn off the
It's middle.
Minimal, probably not more than.
And that was all before.
So what are other core values that you have?
To support each other. We've done a lot of individual food. How do you describe that? We've had a couple different families who are going through various medical things, and we set up a schedule to bring them food several times a week, which really made a difference.
I think a
In
lot.
one
falls-
case, it wasn't even a member of our church, but it was a friend of the church who needed that, so.
A lot falls under the word service. I think there's a lot of
Yeah,
service
service.
oriented
Yeah.
feeling.
Service especially to the community.
I think we wish we could do more for youth. We do by donations to like schools and the,
Mm-hmm.
what's that?
It's, someone's hand up over here.
I kind of think a purpose for many of us in this church is giving us a purpose.
Giving you what?
A
Giving
purpose.
each one of us a purpose.
Okay.
Good point.
And how does the church do that? How does the church give each of you a purpose?
Do you want to be there to support your fellow
Okay.
member? Because things are going on and you want to
Mhm.
do your part. You feel loyal. Yeah, loyalty. It's, I was gonna say, you don't feel obligated, but you feel like, well, I can't let them do that without, they
Right.
many hands make light work.
And behind,
For me personally, my husband passed away last year, and this church kept me going. I mean, obviously God did, but the support that I received here has just been tremendous, and I know that several others here have lost their spouses, and it's just knowing that other people care, I think.
We truly are a family.
Just thinking that.
in the best sense of the word. Because like not all of our families, we would want to replicate
Right.
in the church. But he's great.
Well, you'd be laughing. Been praying.
Many hands make light work.
Anything else that you would identify as a purpose? Where, where's God fit in that?
I was just gonna
What's the
say,
role
but,
God has?
but we're trying to emulate the service,
Live in
of-
your faith. Some people worship by being contemplative. I think a lot of us here worship by being active and doing and serving.
I also personally feel that this church occupies a niche that I wish more people in the community understood in terms of its theology.
Mm.
We have a lot of conservative churches here, and probably the other somewhat liberal church would be Hope Lutheran, which is the ELCA church, and the rest are definitely on a different end of the spectrum.
Mm.
So I feel like we occupy a space on that continuum that's kind of important to preserve.
The United Church of Christ, oftentimes it's our congregation and maybe one other in our communities that provides a sense of inclusion, incorporation, involvement, looking concerned about the issues of what's going on around, not just the community, but the world. And often can feel very isolated. Because people don't understand us. They have that misperception because all they hear about is that ultra conservative Christian view of things, which is so not who we are as the United Church of Christ.
So our experience is similar to a lot of the UCC churches.
Yes, very, very much so. And it's not as relevant in the, urban metropolitan areas because there's so many churches and so many different kinds of people. But when you get out in greater Minnesota, it's usually our church. I mean, we have one church in a community that has 30 churches in, 15,000 people live there.
Wow.
30 churches.
30 churches, wow.
And they're, again, the UCC church, extremely progressive, open and affirming, very justice oriented, very involved in the community, and an ELCA Lutheran church. One other of the 30 churches in a community of 15,000. It's like, I don't know how they maintain. I mean, they all have buildings except that other progressive ELCA church, because I was serving as their interim. And that's how I got to know this community so well. So that, I mean, I don't know about you, but I will say I take a lot of pride in that we shine a light out into the midst of what can often be incredibly conservative areas.
Okay, well,
So how do we get that
this is
message
different.
out to the greater community? I know the UCC had a series of commercials on TV about 10 years or so ago, but I haven't seen anything since.
Yeah, there aren't funds to do that anymore. And the campaign God is still speaking and trying to help people understand, we welcome questions. You don't have to believe this list of things in order to be a part of our church. I think it all comes down to the members of the churches helping people understand how your church is unique, how it's different, how it might live out its belief of, because a lot of people would say, I would venture to guess, that because we don't have this strict criteria of things you have to believe in order to be a part of a UCC church, that doesn't mean that we don't have a faith. We do have a faith.
Yeah.
Our faith calls us, and then to be able to respond to that. Why are you volunteering on the library board? Why are you a part of this? Why does your church hold these concerts? What's the purpose of it? And making sure to use every opportunity you can, whether it's at the beginning of the concert, just to make the statement so that people realize who you are. It's all you do you're telling your story. We have never been good at telling our story in the United Church of Christ. And we are scared to death of the word evangelism because we've seen it harm so many people. We're not out there to convert people, except in the sense that we really think that how we function, meaning that we're congregational in the sense that we don't have a hierarchy, and we are independent, but we have covenantal relationships with all the other UCC churches in the entire country. But our freedom allows us to be very, like our communion table is open to anybody. You don't have to prove to me that you've confessed your sins, that you're a member of the church.
Put that on that list over there, open communion.
Yeah.
I meant to yell it out, but
Yeah,
something I value about this church.
That is something, but I think it's our
Me too.
lack of telling the story and connecting it to our faith. That's the hard part, I think, for most of us, is to realize, this whole idea of service and giving people a purpose, living out our faith, that's because you feel, and if I'm wrong, feel free to challenge me. I hear that you're saying that we do these things because we feel called to do that. You're supposed to do this.
Yeah, that's what,
When you're part of the Asian community.
it's nothing you said.
No.
You just had-
Don't worry about it. Yes, I should be right, but I have to give you your results too. So, I think that's the
No.
biggest
Should I
challenge
tell people?
for us, is really telling the story about this church in a way that people understand. We do this because we're people of faith.
Right.
That's what is driving us to do this. So now I want to go and talk about the assessment that you all participated in. And I always like to use this quote, and it says, congregational experiences show that churches who face their future well, no matter what the outcome is, they do so when congregational leaders, pastors, and congregational members are all involved in discussing their church's future and making the necessary decision. That's what we're doing today. That's a first step, that no matter how things end up, that's not what's important. What's important is that you have taken the time, you are being intentional about this conversation, which I believe can dramatically change the trajectory of your church. There are ways that people have chosen other paths, I call them possible pathways, that churches have taken when they have tried to look to the future. And I have a document that talks about, advantages and challenges of each of these, but there, some of our churches used to use the word revitalize. But I came to believe that that word meant we're going to be what we were in the 50s and 60s. And no church is going to be able to do that. I mean, if they're larger to begin with, they could do that. And they could reinvent, in that sense of becoming what they used to be. But it's a hard one to swallow in our churches because of how decreasing membership has happened.
Yeah.
And the aging of our membership. So now I call it reimagining. And I think every one of our churches, there's very, very few churches that shouldn't be trying to reimagine themselves. It is not easy work. It will not happen overnight. It takes a pastor with certain skills, and it takes a group of people that has a lot of commitment to being able to do that well. We have had 2 churches last year, and we're going to have another 2 this year, that the path they chose was to merge with another church. Whether it was with another UCC church, or if it's with from another denomination. That's how they saw their future, that it made more sense instead of having these 2 congregations be in one place together, and attempt to re-envision, to reimagine who they were together, instead of on their own. Some of our churches have decided to share a minister with another church in town. That's not necessarily with a UCC church or a UCC pastor, because now we have people from, Presbyterian, ELCA, United Methodist, Disciples of Christ, ministers in our churches. That they're serving our churches. We have our ministers in all those churches too. There's a lot more of a sense of ecumenical partnership that's going on now than ever has either. So sometimes, a church that has a Presbyterian church that's close by, and they have a half-time pastor, and this church a UCC church has a half-time pastor. What if we were to come together and be able to pay for a full-time pastor, and share that person between us? Okay. Others have done what's called consolidation. The classic way of consolidating is both churches get rid of their buildings and they start a whole new ministry together as a whole new entity. They're no longer these two separate entities. Our Robbinsdale and Parkway churches said they consolidated, but they still went to the Robbinsdale church. They didn't feel they needed to create a different building to create something new. It looks a little more like a merger, in my opinion. But that consolidation is another way. Some of our churches have sold their buildings. We have one of our newest churches never's had a building, swears they'll never have a building. But they used to rent a space in the heart of town and realized so much money was going to rent that they said, this is stupid. And they thought, well, we started as a house church. Maybe we should go back to that. Because they weren't growing. I mean, it wasn't happening in a very conservative area. And so they said, the heck with this. We're going to figure out something else. So they tried different locations, and then somebody stepped forward and said, you're that church. You're that church that does X, Y, and Z in the community. I want you to use my space that I have in the heart of town. If you could give me $20 a week, it gives you access to all the technology you could imagine and free coffee. I was like, that didn't take long for that small church to decide to do that. And they're able to give thousands of dollars away instead of throwing it into rent.
Yeah.
But for the churches that do have buildings that are starting to question if they can afford them, or if in fact they absolutely need them, because a lot of our churches get used for, 2-3 hours a week. So they may be selling it. We had a church that has since closed, but they sold their building to a nonprofit and put into the sale agreement that we could worship here in perpetuity. And so they never had to pay a dime. From the minute they sold it at a really discounted price. Mm-hmm. They could have gotten more, because this was in the Twin Cities. And so they were able, until the day came that they no longer could continue, and they decided to complete their ministry and close. But they didn't have to maintain that huge building. Mm-hmm. Big building, big property, because they used to be a big church. Yeah.
What happens to the money in the event of a sale? I know once we got a lump sum from the sale of a church, but I don't remember what determined that we were going to receive some of that money.
That it's the choice of the church. It has to go to a nonprofit. It can't be given to members. Members can't, have a piece of the sale price.
What determines?
It's the government.
The sale of a church property doesn't necessitate it has to go back to the UCC conference or anything like that?
It depends on your bylaws.
Oh, okay.
Whatever your bylaws say, that's what you have to follow. And that'll be the first thing that,
You're a nonprofit.
It has to be sold to a nonprofit. It could be given. It could be sold for $1, because we've had a church do that too.
Yeah, we heard.
Most recently, we had a church, they sold it to the healthcare industry in their community. And they're going to gift the money they're getting, because the place will be torn down. Mm. That's my understanding. It hasn't happened yet. And they're going to give away the money because they have completed their ministry and closed. But again, the first thing I said to him was, look at your bylaws. What did they say? You have to follow your bylaws.
And I think our bylaws designate that if this property were sold, the proceeds would go to the Minnesota Conference United Church of Christ.
And was this a former evangelical and reformed church or former congregational?
Congregational.
It was congregational.
Yeah.
Most of our former evangelical and reformed churches, they do say that. Not a lot of our congregational churches say that. But your bylaws are your bylaws. And churches have been known to change them
I was just gonna say.
over the course of the years. we don't have the capacity as a staff and volunteer organization to take on property. Unless we know it's really simple to sell. And that's not necessarily the case in greater Minnesota. It can be in some areas, but, my understanding is those that have that in their bylaws, it's because they feel a strong covenant with the wider United Church of Christ. And, a former congregational church that was UCC that closed, it didn't say that in their bylaws, but they still decided that when they sold their building and then got a lot of money for it, they still gave the conference, the national setting of the church, to United Seminary, to, all of these UCC affiliated portions of the church, because they felt that their legacy, that's what their legacy was, that the covenant that they felt with the greater denomination. Some of our congregations, as they've tried to envision a different future, have moved to sharing their building, so that we have a church that has 2 Liberian congregations that meet in their church. So that when they're done with worship, actually one comes in and does their service during the fellowship time. And another one was a Seventh-day Adventist group, and so they were there all day Saturday and used the church. Others, they share their building, like Spring House Ministries, which is United Church of Christ, Disciples of Christ, and ELCA, yes. So that they're all in one building. They actually pooled some money from selling 2 of the buildings to remodel this one building. But they're sharing it. And then we have another new branches that's doing the same thing. That's sharing with Episcopalian and Old Catholic. Different than Roman Catholic. They have women priests. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's another thing. Some congregations go from having an ordained minister to a lay minister, or multiple lay ministers, raising up 2-3 people from their own membership to be their spiritual leaders, as they are trained through the conference, our Damascus project, and so the cost is dramatically different, because it's not inexpensive to have your minister. Obviously, I'm biased, being one, that I think we bring a lot of value to a church, but it can get to a point where it becomes too much to be able to afford. You had your hand up.
I was just gonna mention that our sister church that we used to partner with a minister on several years back in Hackensack, the UCC church in Hackensack, they have sold off the bottom half of their church to a daycare facility. And they have it completely closed off from the upstairs church. So that's another option.
Yes, sell or lease?
Lease.
Yeah, I don't think
Is
it's
it
sold.
lease?
Yeah.
Oh, I misunderstood it then.
And obviously, the last one being that those churches that have discerned they need to complete their ministry and close, which I don't see that for you. So I wanted you to know, because now I want to get to that assessment. There were 40 assessments sent out, and there were 20 that were completed, which to me, that pretty much represents those active members. That's probably who bothered to fill them out. So it's not as though that's not a good return. If the number was significantly less than your active members, then I'd be worried that it really wasn't very reflective. So a thing to keep in mind that this assessment talks about is the vitality and sustainability. That you need to, it doesn't matter what size you are, as far as a church, just so long as a congregation that has a strong connection, relationship with God, each other, and the world If those are strong, that's a vital church. But if they're not sustainable, as much as you want, that kind of congregation would want to be able to move forward, that presents a new challenge in the picture. Sustainability has to do with those two things, that money, obviously, that you need in order to continue the ministry, paying for the facility, the utilities, all that kind of stuff, and in your case, the minister and musicians and things like that. But you also need the human capacity to be able to continue to provide that kind of ministry in the future. So this is, and I'm gonna have to turn this sideways, and I'm gonna have to hold this. Well, what I'll do is,
Yeah, that works.
this is your, so it doesn't end up falling. So this scale is the vitality scale, and this is the sustainability scale. I didn't even show stuff that was less than that, because this is the quadrants. The little stars represent one person's assessment. And if you'll see, the vast majority of yours is falling here. Okay? Most of your sustainability scores, in fact, half of them, fall at 2. And so the area that's probably strongest is right here. Though there's some going both ways, and there's a couple way over here with sustainability, and this is as far as you go with sustainability. But what I want to point out, there's nobody that's below 3 for vitality. I don't usually see that.
You think that's a positive?
It's definitely a positive. That I think churches wait too long before having this kind of conversation. And the sense is that these numbers have moved downward. I mean, I've had them way down here. I've done a different kind of thing, talking about the life cycle of a church, because no church was ever intended to be in existence forever. And St. Paul's churches are gone. They don't exist anymore. But those churches that have taken the time to really have the kind of conversations you need to have at significant threshold moments makes all the difference in the world. So yes, it says declining. Renewal or formal redevelopment may be needed. So there's some intentional work that needs to be done, but it doesn't, it's not a negative thing. I shared what I had learned with my colleagues at the conference last week, and their experience of you and what we know of you, it didn't surprise them. And I didn't know a whole lot. I just knew that Dan had been here a while. I know Michael. I know them both. That's all I really knew about you, because I've only been in this role for 3.5 years. And so they were pleasantly, saying, "Good. I'm glad it's still there." And that people are feeling generally pretty vital. That this is a vital congregation, because that's their sense of your congregation. Now, what I did, those are your individual scores, because remember, you had to give a vitality and a sustainability score. What I also did was take each of you and figure out what your cumulative score was. And that's what the stars are, your individual ones. But then I also looked at the cumulative. I could talk. This is not going to be able to be posted and stay up without some tape. So
tape? Would you like tape?
Well, if it can be taped up and it'll stay up, if
I'll
it's
get it.
painter's tape or something, it'll probably
It's
stay up.
back in here. I moved the part.
Oh, you moved it. Oh.
But what then I did is I looked at those three areas. Remember, I said connection or relationship with God, with each other, and with the world. Okay, so the social justice stuff would be world, each other. You've all been talking about that, and the relationship with God. And so the cumulative score of the entire group is up here at 4, a level of 4. This one with each other, connection with each other, is a 4. This one for the world is 4.2, I believe. 4. Yeah, I think it's 4.2. And when you look at this and you learn that this is how, cumulatively you all, there were 5 statements that had to do with your connection with God. There were, I think, 6 having to do with each other, or 4, 5, and then 6 here. But this is the whole group, okay, of each statement.
Oh,
That's why it's called these are not individuals. These are your entire group that responded to question 1, 2. It's not, that literally isn't 1, 2, 3. I didn't do that. But of 5 different statements, that's how the ranking is. So again, nothing's below 3. And then over here, you've got a little more commonality around, right around 4s, because you've got 3.7 is the lowest and 4.3 is the highest. And then for world, you're pretty much way up here. I mean, one person had a 3.7.
And one way high.
And one was 4.8. Yeah.
one question.
Pardon?
These are questions, right?
These are responses to statements, the cumulative number for the whole group, for one question here, one. And that the stars are the where you ended up
Averages.
as an average. So the stars are just the average. And they're 4s. They're in the 4s. And the fact that they're practically tied, 2 of them literally are tied, these first 2, tells me that you don't have an area of weakness. Okay? You're good. The way you view yourselves is we're doing good in all these areas. Okay? Because I would argue for a church to continue to thrive, it does have to be strong in all these areas. You can limp by without one or the other, but it's really going to impact the overall life of the church. So I commend you on that, and I thought I'd read off to you some of the statements that you responded to in the assessment. The highest score was a 4.8. Addresses social concerns, helping those in need. That was the highest score. A clear sense of vision was 4.3. Build strong, healthy relationships among members was 4.3. That's what you say about yourselves. The lowest score that you gave was a 3.7. That was equips members to share their faith. That came up today about how do you do this? How do you tell people about it? And then tied with that same low number of 3.7, which is still not a low number, but I'm wanting to hear from you why you think you also had listed at the lowest score, always ready to try something new.
I think if I was reserved on that, it's because of resources.
Okay, so you were thinking from a sustainability issue, okay?
I may have responded a little bit lower on that one, just thinking, I'd love to try something new, but, there's only so much we can take on.
Why else do you think you would have rated that of all the statements that got one of the 2 lowest? They were tied.
I would agree with Esther that because I think we are very much open to new things and would love to do new things.
Yeah, I didn't
The
hear
Good
that.
News
That's
Coffee
why I
House
wanted
is
you
brand
to-
new,
I
less than a
wanted-
year old. The Good News Coffee House.
Yeah.
We just started that less than a year ago.
Mhm.
So, earlier this year, actually. So we are open to try new things, but we throw lots of things out and the one we gotta put reins on is Esther. Honestly, I've done it myself. I put reins on and go, well, wait a minute, who's gonna do that, Esther? And she'll say, well, yeah. And I go, not me. And they say, no, I'm doing it.
Call Tim up, he'll know.
So, remember how I showed you most of you on the sustainability scale? Again, that's the bottom, that's the green line. Are on number 2, half of you put number 2. That scale was 1 to 4. Vitality was 1 to 5. So being right in the middle, again, it could be 1. And unfortunately, I see that. But usually, it's the human capacity part of sustainability, that's the hardest part. Of all the churches that have closed, I think 1 ended up with no money left over. They all had money to give away
Yeah,
when they closed.
Yeah.
That wasn't the bottom line issue, that it really was capacity,
Yeah.
human capacity.
Yeah.
So, only 1 person, scored the church at a 1, which means it's declined to being not sustainable. And 14 of you, put yourselves at a level 2, which is declining but still sustainable.
What was level 3 again? As I said, I remember my number was 3-3.
Level 3 on the sustainability score is maintained. So there were 4 people.
Well, as long as we're still alive, we can maintain.
So do either this or that, does that surprise you?
Not exactly.
No.
Yeah, because like I said, it's kind of what I heard.
No, but that's what you say, no, that's.
So, and so your strengths would be what? What would you describe as your strengths?
Optimism.
Optimism.
And, well, we don't see God and Jesus a whole lot. I mean, that's our driving force.
Yeah.
To do good.
Yeah.
And serve. And, well, I'm not gonna I'd love to sell everything I have, but he won't let me. But, give it all away, but try to, whenever I get tired, somebody wants something and needs something and I get tired, I just go, who are you? Get up there and go do it. You still can do it, so you go do it. And I do it based on Jesus's life, God. It's what we're supposed to do.
What are some?
And this gives me the
especially
strength
those
to
of you
do
who
that.
haven't said
I
anything
come in here.
today. What do you consider to be strengths of this church?
Fellowship.
Well,
Yeah.
I think each individual member brings something to this church. Like Esther and Bonnie, Esther's been in business her whole life, Bonnie's been in nursing. They both work well together and they're able to work with each other and the community. I mean, if you go to each individual person, they all have something that makes them unique and has the knowledge that helps. If someone has a question, they can say, well, Debbie, what do we do with this? Or, Bev, what do we do for this? And my husband's a plumber, and she was a union member, retired, and Ryan in the military, knowing all the different aspects of the military and keeping that strong, and musicians and whatnot. But everybody has this unique ability in ways, and everybody works together.
We got a
With
lot of
their
teachers
knowledge.
that have patience.
Okay, what other strengths from those of you who we haven't heard from maybe today?
I think it's just like we have said, it just takes a village. You know, yesterday, we had basically 6 people taking care of the funeral for the luncheon and everything. But we all pulled together, and I think that's the thing. There's always somebody that'll come in and help with whatever we need to be done. I mean, the thing with the rummage sale was a nightmare. It truly was. There's a lot of work, but it was something we all felt good about at the end. Not that we want to do it again, Esther. But it was really beneficial, and it's gonna benefit, you know, charities, and so I think that's for us. For my opinion is we just work together. We don't give up.
Right. And we don't whine and cry about who's not here, you know, that's the best part.
There can be, that can really drag a church down.
Yeah, we don't do that. We don't say, well, where's so-and-so? We go, who you got? Who you got? Okay, let's do this and this and this, and we figure out the strengths and use them, and even if it's just a cheerleader, egging us on.
I'm just cheering right now.
No, I was looking at Margie, because she always is telling me, oh, I wish I could, and I said, well, I always need somebody smiling at us and patting us on the back, because you've been there, done that, you know.
So I mentioned earlier some of the possible pathways that churches take in order to respond to a significant threshold moment. And I'm going to leave the document with, like I said, every single one of them has pros and cons, meaning that things that that it helps if you go that route, it helps to do this, but there's also challenges to every single one of them. So I will be sharing that with Michael. There are some other things I want you to keep in mind, because what you need to do from here, your next step, is for all of you to sit down and have a conversation about reflecting on what I've shared with you. This is what you've said. So what does this, how do you discern, and I would really encourage you to do this very prayerfully, and asking the Holy Spirit to help you figure out what makes sense to you after hearing this kind of information. What do you need to be considering? And what do you need to look at that you never thought you would ever consider, maybe in the past? But that you have that discernment process together as a group that Michael can help facilitate, but it needs to be your conversation. And there's some other things that can help. There's a thing called the Innovation Cultural Index. This is a resource that, because of money that the conference has given, which is because of your OCWM giving, we were able to have somebody train who then can work with congregations to figure out how prepared are they to really try to do some significant change, if that will allow them to move forward in a different way. That there are congregations I talked about that they sell their property and church. Some of them just sell it to their city, to the county, and it becomes a place to house social services. I mean, your building is not very old. I mean, some of our churches are built in the 1800s. And that some churches have found that either selling it outright with that disclosure, that in the sale to say, what we can worship here in perpetuity, or we can have X number of events throughout the year utilizing this part of the building, whatever it might look like, so that no longer is that building expense hanging over a church. That's what some have decided to do. Some people invite more people in to rent. I don't think that's really very feasible, especially in greater Minnesota. There just isn't, that doesn't make much of a difference. If you, some churches have given their church away I mean, they actually have to officially sell it to a nonprofit for $1. But, again, it's just so that it's really being used by the community. I mean, it's clear this church, a core value is helping your community, being connected, meeting the needs in your community. So, you know, maybe talking with leaders from your town, from your county, and figuring out, are there needs that you can meet that you didn't even know about? Because usually we don't talk to organizations a lot about their needs. But if you want to partner, you know, asking those leaders, how can we help meet the needs that you're finding in our community? That is another way. A church like yours could become a church that's mainly a summer church with, you know, like Christmas and Easter still being celebrated, but the building would not get used as much, or it could be used by others during the winter. Obviously, if you became a summer church, that dramatically impacts your pastoral leadership and what they would be doing. But that's not an unusual thing for our churches that have a difference in population throughout the year. And I also mentioned about the idea of lifting up from amongst yourselves, like 3 people who could, with the right resources, be able to be trained in a way that you could provide that care for each other, connection with God, connection with each other, and yet continued connection with the world. Because it's a lot lower expense. And there are funds that you can access through the conference that can help train those people. So those are just different other things that I just wanted to throw out there. And really, I do think you are, I do not see closure for you. It would be a very sad day if that happened anytime soon, because you are a vital congregation. You do have to keep that one piece that was in the corner, about one person contributing. That's gonna when that day comes, you better have a plan. Because you're not gonna have time to make any kind of adjustments. You're gonna have to know what we're gonna do from that moment forward so that you're prepared. And as horrible as it may sound, some churches have met with, found out what the value of their property is, how, if they could sell a piece of it, if they could sell, you know, the whole thing, what would it be worth? You know, what could you do with those kind of funds that you might not be able to do right now? And that also would help you extend the life of your congregation. So as I mentioned, no church is ever going to exist forever. But you can do everything you possibly can in preparing to have a legacy to leave. And the more prepared you are for that, the more likely you will feel good and be able to celebrate that legacy when that day comes down the road. So, you are at a significant threshold. And I strongly encourage you to start making a plan, if nothing else, just for when the day comes that that person dies and that gift is gone. And depending on who this person is and who knows them the best, it wouldn't hurt to have a conversation with them to find out what their hopes and dreams are for the church. Oftentimes our churches are surprised when a gift comes after somebody dies that they had no idea.
Every one of them so far in the last 5 years.
Yep. But you can't count on them unless you ask. Then you can count on them. I mean,
We're from
there's
Minnesota,
nothing
we
wrong
don't
with
ask
that.
those kind of questions.
I get asked that all the time from my
Yeah.
seminary, so it's my husband from his seminary, so there's nothing wrong with finding out
I
people's
know.
intentions. One of the things I always tell whoever the financial recorder or secretary is for the church, is for them to figure out how old everybody is. I mean, and the reason to do that is, and to honestly know, I mean, not guess. I'm horrible at guessing cases. But to find out the ages of people and to say, 30% of our budget is paid for by people that are older than 80 years old. And yet 50%, is paid this way or this way. It gives you more information to be better prepared for what's coming down the road.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, if you don't have a plan will be made for you and you will not be happy with it. That's why we all write wills, isn't it?
Well, something.
We want to make sure that all of our hard work, that those assets go to where we want them to go. I don't want the government deciding where that goes. I don't even want my children to figure that out. I want to figure that out. And that's kind of what we do in the church, that if we are looking ahead, planning, realistically preparing, we're going to have, in the long run, we're going to be a lot happier with how things end up. So I thank you for your time. You have had a very long day here at church, and it's exciting to hear what's happening here and how you're feeling about it, and the conference applauds you for it, and we want to continue to be of support to you. It doesn't stop here today, and so
Thank you.
Michael knows how to get a hold of us.
Yeah.
But-
And I want to thank all of you for this time. I know it's been stretched. I mean, we began with worship, we ate, and then we worked. And now let's, I guess, go play. And but yeah, we'll follow up with the council. And Cindy, thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
And Michael, do you want to just
Yeah.
take a picture of these?
Yeah, let me do that.
Because I would like to take them home. I'm gonna leave that for you, but if you want to,
You want to speak?
I'll just clip it on.
That's why that dog barking was where I knew it.
You must be.
She looked this big thing and it was moving. Yeah, sure.
3:30. But I looked and I saw this white thing coming up the steps and you were kind of wondering.
About that.
But she was halfway up the stairs.
Margie, yeah, I just.
Margie, don't forget Margie.
Do we need to put the sign up for the coffee house? Do you want me to help you? Or,
No.
or is Ryan gonna do it?
I know they were.
Oh, he rests, he actually keeps his eyes closed a lot.
It's pretty easy. We unhook this one, let it drop to the ground. We hook the next one and then I just go down.
Clean up. So you
I got a half an hour and then I gotta go to work again.
While you're getting up, I'm gonna get stuff on the floorboard.
Or we can do it
Okay.
together.
I don't mind.
I have a pot of decaf.
I just wanna get.
Ken's going, where is she?
Yeah, I just, okay.
Watching football.
Is it? And Emily Meyer.
Yeah.
Oh, with a.
Coffee house. Coffee.
She's accessible and she works with all kinds of HF.
Well, again, I think you probably we captured for you who we are. And we have fun doing what we do. And there is not.
Nice, yes.
All the way.
It I've seen it. Churches are.
And eventually we'll work.
Oh, yeah. I want down to that.
And Joel is one of our local musicians. I imagine I don't know that he may have written those songs.
That's what I'm
Right, I heard from somebody that he writes everything he sings. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know if that's actually the case.
And he sings some covers, but, yeah, he's out of and they would have stayed up there doing beekeeping. And the hives, they can't pretend hives are there. So they came up with stickers. Right. All right, well, this is recorded. Okay. And now, you know,